Today we're going to go ahead and take a look at circular functions. We're going to look at functions on a unit circle. A unit circle, that means your radius is a unit or 1 unit. So when you think back to your definition of sine and cosine, cosine was x over r. But if you're on a unit circle, your radius is 1 unit, so it'd be x over 1, which we don't need to put it over 1. So if you're on a unit circle, cosine of your angle is just your x-coordinate. Sine, according to your original definition, was y over r, but once again, you're on a unit circle, so r is 1. So sine is just y over 1, or sine of your angle is the y-coordinate on your unit circle. You're going to need to know this definition, so plug it into your memory. That sine is y and cosine is x on your unit circle. So here we go. We're given a coordinates of a point, and you're told that it lies on a unit circle. Then you're asked to find the sine and the cosine. Well, since it's on a unit circle, sine is just y, so it's the y-coordinate of your point. Cosine, since it's on a unit circle, is just the x-coordinate. Now, we're going to go ahead and start plotting our sine graph. Well, you know the sine of 0 is 0. Sine of 90 is 1. Sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Sine of 45 degrees is 2 over 2, which you can do your decimal approximation. Then sine of 60 degrees, you could do your decimal approximation. And then we could also do the decimal approximation of 120 degrees for sine. And so all I'm taking is just the y values, because that's sine on my unit circle, and just doing the decimal approximations and plotting those points on my graph. So we're around to 360. So now all we have to do is just draw in a smooth curve that goes through those points. Well, to draw in a smooth curve going through those points, we end up with this shape. This is your sine curve. Your sine curve, I plotted the points for 360, but it really continues on forever past that and going to the left. Now we're going to do the same thing for cosine. So we're going to go the cosine of 0. We're going to plot that. Cosine of 0, you should remember, is 1. Sine of, or cosine of 90 is 0. Cosine of 180 is -1. Cosine of 270 is 0. Cosine of 360 is 1. Remember, when you're doing cosine, you're looking at the x-coordinate on your unit circle. Well, then we could go ahead and plot some of the others in between, like the cosine of 30 degrees, cosine of 45 degrees, the sine or cosine of 60 degrees, and the cosine of 120 degrees, cosine of 135, cosine of 150, and so on. And we keep plotting these going all the way around. And that allows us to be able to get an idea of what your cosine graph looks like. So when we draw a smooth curve going throughout all these points, we get this. You'll notice the sine and the cosine graphs are very similar. The cosine is just slid over 90 degrees compared to your sine function. Now, you're asked about your period. Your period is how far you have to go before it starts to repeat. Well, I'm at a height of 1 right here at 0. I'm also at a height of 1 again at 360, and then it starts to repeat. Your period for sine and cosine is 360 or 2 pi, depending upon the units you're dealing with. So let's go ahead and find the exact value of this one. We're dealing with 690. Well, that's more than once around, so I'm going to subtract once around. So subtract 360, and I'm back to 330. Well, 330 would be about over here, which would be 30 degrees away from my axes, which means my reference angle is 30 degrees. You're supposed to have memorized the cosine of 30 degrees. Cosine of 30 degrees is root 3 over 2. we now have to decide if it's positive or negative. Well, our initial angle was right here in the fourth quadrant, and we're dealing with cosine. In the fourth quadrant, x is positive. So it's going to be positive root 3 over 2. Looking at negative 3 pi over 4, negative 3 pi over 4, going back 3/4 of the way to pi would be right here in the third quadrant. Our reference angle would be how far we are away, which is 1/4 of a pi away. So our reference angle is pi over 4. Cosine of pi over 4, which is cosine of 45 degrees, you're supposed to have memorized, and we get root 2 over 2. We now have to decide if it's positive or negative. We're here in the fourth quadrant. Remember, cosine is x. X in the third quadrant is negative. So why don't you see if you can quickly go ahead and do these last two and then watch the video. 450, or not 450, 405 has a reference angle of 45. Sine of 45 degrees is root 2 over 2. 405, when you graph it, ends up being right here in the first quadrant, and sine is positive. So it's just positive root 2 over 2. Negative 2 pi over 3 would put you down here in the third quadrant, a reference angle of pi over 3. Sine of pi over 3, or sine of 60, you're supposed to have memorized, which is root 3 over 2. But you're dealing with a y coordinate because it's sine, and you're in the third quadrant for your negative 2 pi over 3, and sine is negative in the third quadrant.